Welcome to episode number 75 of the From the Heart podcast, presented by our new title sponsor, the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses. I'm actually sitting live today here in the studio in Missouri, where First Bank is located. And today we spoke with the chairman of First Bank, Michael Dierberg. Michael's been the chairman of the board of the bank now since 2016. He's fourth generation leader of the family business, 112-year-old family business, by the way. And in our conversation today, we got into a lot of discussion about his background, working in the government, working outside of the family business, his legal background, and now what he loves most about leading a family-owned company that's 4 generations old. We hope that you enjoy our conversation with Michael Dierberg. You're going to hear about his leadership style, about his dad, Jim, and just some of the lessons that he's learned throughout his time here at First Bank. If you have questions about how to reach First Bank and to learn more about how we can help your family business, you can just simply go to first.bank/family business and see the resources and contacts that we have there for you. So we hope you enjoy this conversation with Michael Dierberg on the From the Heart podcast. So just to get things started today, Michael, we appreciate you being here today on the From the Heart podcast. You've been the chairman of the board now for First Bank since about 2016, if I understand correctly. Tell me some of your earliest memories of being involved in the bank, 4th generation family business. You obviously grew up in and around it. Early memories that maybe inspired you or just made you realize, wow, this is what I want to do.
So my earliest memories were my dad talking about business, what was going on at First Bank at the time. Come home from dinner, a lot of the conversation and would revolve around what happened in the office, what things he was working on, those sorts of things. Then when I was, I think, 15, I had my first job at First Bank. It wasn't very glamorous, as many first jobs aren't. So I was worked in the mailroom for a little bit, had some sort of rotation. Part of what I did for that summer was to count checks. And to be honest, this is one of these jobs where I'm glad that this job has gone away.
Yeah.
And the idea was basically when you sent back the checks to our clients, you want to make sure they have the right number of checks. And so for every statement that went out, I was part of the team that was counting up these checks. Good experience. And I think, and then later summers worked as a teller, a variety of things. I did rotations with different departments, marketing, et cetera. Some point in time, I trailed my dad, went with him. Sometimes you find that I think that when you're trailing somebody, just watching them do something, it's not as interesting as actually doing it yourself.
Sure.
And so for our kids, we try to do both. One, do things where we're teaching them, talking to them about the business, but also trying to engage them, in an active way.
What did you learn about leadership in watching your dad? Obviously, today you still learn from him, I'm sure. But what did you learn at that early age about watching him lead and run this bank that has stuck with you the most?
He's not one who likes to talk about the way you should do it. He more does it, and you learn by watching him do it, or him leading by example. So I think one example is integrity. He demonstrates integrity in everything he does. It's never a question. He doesn't brag or talk about it or teach integrity. He just does it.
He is.
Yeah. He's an incredibly sharp thinker. Asks really good questions. And so I think that's something I definitely noticed early on watching him interact is the questions he asks. And for example, you ask someone, why are they doing it this way? And they say, well, that's the way we've done it. I think we all know that's not a good answer.
Exactly.
But my dad was very good at sussing that out. But I think you'd asked before about, sort of when did I know something I want to do? And the answer for me, it was I had a meandering, not a direct line into the business. So I've had various points of time, like I mentioned, the summer jobs. Then I went to, actually between college and law school, I taught English. So, great skill. It was a lot of fun. I taught English in Poland and in Argentina. So amazing experiences, not banking.
Yeah.
Right. Then I went to law school, all the way up until about midway through law school. I thought I was going to go into politics.
Yep.
So somewhere along the line, I wised up and realized, one, not for me, tough life. There's a lot of things about it that just weren't right for me.
Sure.
in law school, I decided, well, I probably ought to be a lawyer for a little bit. This makes some sense. Having gone to law school.
Invested the time and the money into law school, might as well, right?
Right. I mean, my dad, he advocated going to law school for business purposes. So he thought it was a good idea regardless. And maybe he knew I was eventually going to wise up about politics. But so my dad went to law school, never practiced, but found a lot of value in that. For me, I went to law school, then practiced as an attorney for the OCC, a federal bank regulatory agency, for a couple of years. So that was a great experience, seeing it from the regulatory side. I was doing that in Washington, D.C. And then after doing that for 3 years, then I thought of, well, if I want to make the plunge, maybe I should make the plunge into the bank. I was single, and sort of questioned whether I should come to St. Louis or San Francisco. Seemed like more single people in San Francisco at the time. So I ended up going to San Francisco and worked there for a couple of years. Worked out well in the sense I met my wife there. Had a great time in San Francisco. I was general counsel for a period of time, a regional manager for a period of time. Great experience, great time there. But for me, what was, because I think back in that time, the bank from probably from the Great Depression all the way to, this is like, let's say, was in San Francisco 2001 to 2004. And during that time period, the bank had done incredibly well throughout that entire period. It never had an annual loss, going up to the Great Recession. And so, and our earnings would fluctuate just really in a small degree, even through recessions, that kind of thing. So it might seem strange to people outside a family business or outside my situation, but it seemed like to me, I wasn't feeling the challenge. So I left the bank, went back to practice law for the Department of Justice, looking for, challenge, and I missed litigation at that time. So worked at the Department of Justice for 6 years. That was from 2004 to 2010. During that time period, I realized the challenge. The challenge became apparent because, we that was a rough period for First Bank. And I really realized, during that time period, the role that family can play and the importance of having family in the business. But during that time period, my dad had stepped down as CEO. He was chairman during that time period. But we had nobody in the family, wasn't a lot of family presence in the business. And just to have that connection to what's going on, the credit side and other ways. So I came back to St. Louis actually with the idea of I was going to, work at a law firm. So I actually came here, worked as a partner for a month at a law firm. And I quickly realized to have the connection, because I wanted to work at the law firm and be really connected to the bank. But trying to juggle those two things, trying to work at a law firm, have a legit legal practice, doing the things that you're supposed to do as a partner, and then also being as connected as I want to do to the bank, it became very clear quickly that wasn't going to be an ideal situation. Also, the bank at the time was still, working through some issues. So I joined the bank in 2010, rejoined the bank. And at that time, I would say I knew it was the right thing to do. I didn't know that I was going to love it as much as I do. So it wasn't really until 2010 that I knew this is what I'm going to do. When in the past, when I asked my dad, did you ever struggle with, is this the right thing for you? He said something like every day during his career, every day he didn't know what was he going to come back the next day, that kind of thing. But he
recommit every day, basically.
But for me, I'd say since 2010, it's been clear. I have no intention of going anywhere. Love being here, love being part of the team. And I don't miss litigation at all. So I tell people I'm a recovering attorney, trying to unlearn some of the things that I've learned as an attorney. But anyways, that's kind of this meandering path. I do think that from a family business standpoint, a lot of family businesses have a thought of, you should work somewhere else first.
Right. That's common.
Right. So I may have overdone that, or I didn't, the number of years I had outside of family business, but I do think it's important, to do that. And I do think I have a different perspective having worked elsewhere, and I think some of the issues sometimes families face with entitlement and that kind of stuff. And hopefully that's not, something that I demonstrate, or reflect in how I act. But I certainly now appreciate the challenge. I appreciate the role of the family in the business, and I love being a part of it.
So you have some unique experience. A lot of people who listen to this podcast or watch have only worked in a family business or have never worked in a family business, so they don't understand the other side. You have that unique experience. And like you said, a lot of family businesses do almost require their children to come up and get that outside experience. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about your observations of the difference in working for a traditional organization versus working for a family business, and really kind of the main things that stand out to you?
So I have a pretty unique situation in that I don't really have significant outside private company experience. So what I have is government experience.
Yeah, that's one a lot of people don't have. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then family, being part of family business. So it is unique. I mean, I taught English for a while, but
Sure.
It's really kind of different. So for me, I think having worked elsewhere, been responsible, working for the Department of Justice and the SEC, you are responsible for yourself and your own performance and that kind of stuff, which is really nice, important to have as a family member who eventually becomes part of a family business. But what I found interesting since rejoining the bank is that sometimes people who are not family members, but have worked in large publicly traded companies, they really educate me on how it's different. And they bring to the table, this appreciation for working at First Bank that, frankly, for me, it's hard to see. These things like, sort of the quarter to quarter, focus as opposed to really a long-term focus.
Sure.
And that's what it is. What I know is having that long-term focus. But it's nice to see and nice to hear when we have leaders that come from larger companies and their experience here is just very different. And I think that's something we as a company, that's, part of our, I think, what's going to make us succeed going forward, what makes us succeed now is this great environment we have as a family business. But honestly, for me, I hear this as much from other people because for me, it's government, family-owned business is a sort of different contrast.
What type of surprises would you say you've had from what you thought the job was going to be as chairman when you came in 2016 to what it's actually been in the last 6 years? Anything really surprise you that maybe Dad didn't prepare you for, or you didn't think, or the outside experiences didn't prepare you for?
No, I think just the one would be that I love it as much as I do. Frankly, that's the surprise. I didn't have this thought growing up like I really absolutely want to do banking. But I have, I don't know, it's hard to say it's a surprise, but we have, evolved our strategy as a company during that time period. And that's been really awesome to be a part of. So coming out of the Great Recession, first the period of, rebuilding and strengthening the company. But then there was a period of us taking a step back, thinking about where we want to be in the future, our mission, vision, values. We hadn't really engaged in a meaningful process around that in the past. And some of these things, like you go back to the time period when my dad was CEO, all that was in his head.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But it wasn't something that you put out on paper, and it wasn't also something that you involve the team. So when we went through that process, 2013, we started on that process, we involved a big swath of the company as a part of that process, and including the vision, mission, and values. Yeah. And that was really awesome to do it that way. And our CEO at the time, a non-family CEO, he had the perspective of he should step back from that, and frankly that I should too. And I really like that rather than either getting into wordsmithing or
like the organization,
that there's something built from the organization, and I think it reinforces the values that that are important to the family. But it wasn't like, we're this family with,
if you're part of creating it, you're going to buy into it as well.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Have there been, I want to get into the conversation about the Center for Family-Owned Businesses and the why behind that and why now. But before I do that, I'd love to hear you talk about other leaders that maybe have inspired you, whether they're famous or somebody you know, or is your dad. Obviously, you've touched on your dad and dive deeper there if you'd like to. But what is it about the leaders that have inspired you, and what do you? I guess how would you define a great leader based on what you've learned and the type of leader you're trying to be here at First Bank as well?
Mm-hmm. So I think the key thing from an organizational standpoint is to have a mix of skill sets and sort of the Moneyball, think about from the Moneyball or the book or the movie, that kind of thing. That we can't have a team of people that are all great in the same way.
Yeah, you don't need 9 shortstops.
Right. So I think that's really important from an organizational standpoint. So the skills that we need as leaders in a company, it's nice to have a complement. Everyone's going to be a little bit different and bring something to the table, and to be able to, one, assemble a team that has all that together. And also, I think everybody has something to give,
right?
And something that they do really well, and something you can learn from. And I think from our entire employee base, I'm inspired by the way that they act, the way that they work, the way they give back to the community. A lot of the folks that are the ones who are most giving of their time outside the company to the community are also the ones who are actually doing the best from a sales or performance standpoint within the company. And that inspires me. And, like with our CEOs, there's a lot that I've learned just working with them. From Terry McCarthy, our CEO during the downturn, the way he pulled us through, the integrity he demonstrated. So we working with our regulators, always upfront about where we stood, with our employees, always upfront, and then setting really clear goals. Here's where we need to be. Like, let's not worry about 5 years down the road from
one step at a time.
One step at a time. We got long-term plans, but let's here are the milestones we need to hit. Tim Lathe, next CEO, brought so many great things to the table. His way of bringing people together, and he was the one who really pushed for this process of integrating everybody within the company, or a big chunk of the folks within the company as a part of our strategic planning process. Shelley Seifert, our CEO, now amazing leader. I think she brings a ton of things. One of the things she does bring is an outward mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So she's always asking, what can she do to help? She's the CEO. So
very servant leadership type of a style I've noticed with Shelley.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's, that's part of our task should be to try to learn from others and everybody, because I know you can. There's so much to give. Other people have so much to give.
So First Bank, as we alluded to earlier, is 112-year-old family-owned business, your 4th generation. You've launched recently, and our presenting title sponsor now for the From the Heart podcast is the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses. And I'm grateful to be a part of this, just so you know. So thank you, officially here for the world to see. Tell me why now? Why the Center for Family-Owned Businesses? What was the impetus behind it? Maybe the first initial conversations of doing this, and then the launch. I'd just love to hear the why.
So I think the origin of this, I think it probably came from different directions. So part of it is, from my own perspective, I have the perspective and the history of, as a member in a family business, our family, we had attorneys and people to help with estate planning, those sorts of things. My dad went to law school, so he was on top of that at a very early age. So he could, we could check that box, the estate planning, the legal side of the succession planning, transitions, those sorts of things, and he did a great job with it. But when I was, let's say in my late teens, early 20s, I was also interested in how does this play out with the family from a personal side, not just the tax and, estate planning side of it, and looking around for resources of who could help us to understand how does this play out. I'm 4th generation, so 5th generation, 6th generation. And in my case, in our case, First Bank's case, although I'm 4th generation, we're effectively 2nd generation because my dad bought out relatives on the banking side. So it's essentially shared by, 3 siblings and the kids. So for us, it's a little simpler, but eventually gets more complicated.
Sure.
But there wasn't a lot of resources. We couldn't find resources back then. Maybe, yes, to some extent it's possible. We just didn't are good at searching
Digging
for
them up,
those
sure,
resources, and it wasn't something my dad, amazing in so many different ways, wasn't something he had put a lot of thought into, or he was trying to, look for these answers. So I was asking the questions, nothing will find the answer. And then when coming back to St. Louis, I found that it still, it was hard. There's not a lot of great books. There weren't a lot of great books on family-owned businesses. Not a lot of great resources. I think that's starting to change.
Sure.
Which is great. I mean, so, we got one getting connected to you, and there's, other resources we found, but, the other experience is for us as the bank talking to our clients, we ask, well, who do you go to talk to about these sorts of things?
Right.
And a lot of times it's, I talk to my attorney.
The same old answers.
Yeah. And then I think to some extent, if you're talking to your attorney about it, your attorney went to law school to learn, like your estate planning attorney probably went to, they learned how to minimize your taxes. And that's a big part of it. But how this plays out with the family, those sorts of things, conflict within the family, that's not their daily life.
Their forte,
right? So where do you turn? So, but then meanwhile, as part of our strategic planning process, I think we had gotten to the point of saying, let's be explicit about the fact that we are a family-owned business. But prior to 2013, a lot of the frontline sales folk were talking about it and talking about it in the context of we're not for sale. But they didn't necessarily, we weren't like a company calling it out that we are a family-owned business and that caters to family-owned businesses.
Yeah.
So as a part of that, I think we realized, one, that there's a need out there. That I had experienced it as a need. Our clients were experiencing it as a need. And basically, they don't necessarily know where to turn. There are places now. There are more places, certainly way more places now than there were, even 10 years ago.
Sure.
More resources, but they don't necessarily know about it. And so many of our clients and many family businesses, they assume that the issue they're facing, like they're the only ones in the entire country who have this.
A lot of family businesses don't even realize that family business is a thing. They think dad started a company and I work there. They don't realize that 70% of the companies in the world are family owned.
Right. And then I joined some different groups, where, for a circle of trust, you can talk about these sorts of things. And there's so much value that comes from that conversation. And it's something that a book can't capture it necessarily, or at least I don't know, people, there haven't been that many good books that cover these sorts of things, but it's just a really great environment to cover that. So that's sort of the origin of identifying a need. This is something we as a First Bank, this is our sweet spot, catering to family-owned businesses, and how can we help them? And so then that was the next thing was, how do we build out the center? What are we going to do as a center for family-owned businesses? How can we help our clients?
What type of feedback are you getting early on from clients out here? Now that you've launched the center, I'm sure you're talking to clients regularly. What are they saying about the fact that we've launched the center now here?
I think people are really excited.
Yeah.
I think they see the potential, they see the value, and of course it's across the board. And there might be a generational thing too. Sometimes I see like some, maybe not always the older generation, but sometimes it is where, that's not they've been worried about making money, growing a business, that kind of thing.
We make widgets and we're going to continue to make widgets. Yeah.
Right. And so it might be the next generation that says, let's think about it from a family business standpoint. But I think overall it's been a really positive reaction. I really do get the sense when we have these sorts of conversations with other family-owned businesses that there is a real value that we can help identify. It may not be a situation, let's say it's a conflict. We're not, at First Bank, we're not going to mediate a family conflict.
Right.
But we know people who can help, or we know we can direct them to resources that might be able to help, whether it's like, sort of consultant, or whether it's just here's how to think about resolving and minimizing conflict within family business, or the appropriate level, how much is too much, how much, those sorts of questions. So I think we can be a connector to this information for the family businesses. And I do think that there is a lot of value in get that feedback.
When you look back at the end of your career and you look back at the center, and let's just make this a bigger scope too, not just the Center for Family-Owned Businesses, but the bank as a whole. In your tenure in leading the bank, when you look back X number of years, when you're ready to retire and it moves to the next gen or wherever it goes, how will you know you've been successful? What will be that measure of success that you'd like to see the center accomplish and the bank accomplish, and even personally for yourself?
I think so. One would be just growth in the company, growth among family-owned businesses. The reach of the center would be a measure of that. It's kind of hard to measure the impact on the individual family.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. They can tell you how things are going and thank you, but yeah, the actual,
right.
Metrics.
And it's also, I think it's sometimes there might be an idea that we want to share, or a question we ask that might prompt something within the family, but it may take more than one touch point for that family to really, move it in a certain direction. But, I think there's a tremendous opportunity in the country for First Bank to serve family-owned businesses. I don't know that yet we're going to go nationwide, not this year.
Right.
We're in some big markets like California.
Sure.
So if we grew, if we had 10% of the market in California someday, that would be quite large.
Yeah.
So we don't need basically nationwide coverage or half the market. So I'd be happy with 10% in some of these markets. Yeah. But you never know. Someday maybe we will, in a very specific way or specialized way, go broader than just in the markets we're in today.
So your passion for First Bank, for family businesses, and for what you get to do as the chairman of the board is very evident. When you wake up in the morning and I know you love your job. We've talked. What is it about what you get to do on a daily basis that you just love the most, that puts that smile on your face or warms your heart?
So I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind is working with a team to help grow the company. That's really what excites me. What levers can we pull? What can we do as a company to help our clients, help employees, the community to thrive? That really is exciting. And to feed off the energy, and again, I'm the chair role. Shelley Seifert, our CEO, and then an executive team, and then a broader team of leaders around the company. So just to be a part of that team, that feels great. I love being a part of that. One of the things I also really love, and it's not, I don't do it as frequently. I mean, I meet with clients often, but just to hear the story of some of our clients. I think it sounds like a cliche to say that we support and we support the family dream, the American dream is what I'm trying to get to. It sounds like a cliche to talk about the American dream, but that really is what we do at the bank, and I believe it.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's to hear the story of a family business, or it might be just a family, someone who really sacrificed a lot to build a company. Maybe had a dependable job, could have stayed in that dependable job, and then took the leap to become an entrepreneur. That is, what an incredible leap. The risks they take, putting a mortgage on their house, actually, taking some extra debt to make all this happen, and then to see that grow. That is an incredible story. That's part of what makes America as successful as it is. Yeah. And so we can play a big role in that. I think that's really exciting. And it's just, I love I'm sure you love doing these sorts of interviews.
Sure.
Like me, just to hear those stories, it's just really, really incredible. I think, I'm sure there's some stories like this in other countries, but I do think we have a special opportunity here in the United States that there are a lot of these stories. And again, it may not be a business. It may just be an individual who worked hard, saved up a lot of money, provides for family. Maybe they didn't have a certain education, and they provide for their children to have this education, and the children can then take even a greater step beyond what they've done.
One of my favorite things about working with family businesses for the last couple of decades has been able to go in to your point of seeing what makes people fascinated, whether they're a steel manufacturer or hospitality or whatever they do. Are there any stories, any company, without naming names or anything at all, that you could go back to that one point where just like you had that aha moment of, wow, we're making a difference for these families or these family businesses? I know I'm putting you on the spot to think of something I didn't prepare you for, but that's all right.
No, I think what I would say is recently what we've started to do is have one-on-one conversations with some of our clients, family business clients. And I think some of the families are reluctant to talk. It is kind of a very personal
private
conversation, sure. Right? But I think some of those conversations have been really valuable, but only unfortunately in ways that I can't describe. Right. That's part of the idea is like, I don't, they need to have the confidence that I'm not going to relay what they say. And that's also the part about when we, in other contexts, and I think we're hoping to do this ourselves to create roundtable discussion groups where there is this circle of trust and you can talk about these things and it's not going to appear in the newspaper, or be broadcast, but we as family members in different businesses can share experiences and they might be very similar. And you can really see that benefit, but I can't describe it.
Exactly. So, and it's as unique. They say the snowflakes, if you look out the window, it all looks the same. You stick it under a microscope. I don't know whoever has done that, but if they do, they all look very different. I think family businesses are that way as well. What's the fifth generation of the Dierberg family look like down the road?
Well, it's actually been kind of interesting because I mentioned about, for me, like when I was a teenager, it wasn't the first thing on my mind to be working at the bank. I was thinking I was going to go into politics. Some of the fifth generation is showing a lot of interest in business. So my sister has 5 kids of a big age range. I have 2 children, and we're doing what we can to educate them, not just, if they don't want to be in, nobody's obligated to be in the bank. No, we're not going to force anybody in whatever they want to do. We want to support their passion. Right. I think it's probably generally good advice for most family businesses. But we want to make sure that if they're even non-involved, if they're a doctor, scientist, or whatever, that they have some knowledge about the bank, and about business so they can be, well-informed and good business owners, even if they're not necessarily active in the company. So we're doing that. We started an investment club with the older kids. They kind of went through that. My dad, who's an active bank stock investor, not just First Bank, but other bank stocks. He's a great, it's a great way to like connect my dad, their grandfather, and hear how he thinks about things. So I hear his business mind work, and also be learning as we do this. So a lot of them have seemed interested, but our oldest one is, and the 2 oldest are in college. Yeah. So we got a long ways off, but they do seem to have some interest in business, so we'll see.
Excellent. So what's the best way for our audience to learn more about the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses?
Go to www.first.bank/family business.
So the name of my podcast, as you know, is called From the Heart, last name being Hart. Just stayed up late one night to think of a name. That seemed like a logical one. The reason I do these podcasts is it's great to be informative. It's great to hear what people are doing. And, we can go to our LinkedIn profiles or the IMDb if you're an actor or what have you, to learn more about what people do. But I think what intrigues most people, and definitely what intrigues me the most, is why people do what they do. So if I were to ask you right now in this moment, July 13th, I think we're sitting at when we record this today, Michael Dierberg, what's in your heart?
I think for me, it's optimism. So I think there's a lot of things. I mean, just to set the background, I guess, I think there are a lot of things out there that might give you cause for concern. Economy, I won't get in politics, but I mean, there's just a lot of things that might cause concern. But for me, all through that, there's this strong thread of optimism. And the example, which maybe gets into politics a little bit, but what's happened in Ukraine, what a horrible tragedy. But it's also really a source of optimism. This is the way that so many countries, people have rallied in support of Ukraine has really given me a lot of hope. That, the times where I've worried about, are people indifferent to what things going on? is there a blurring of the lines between right and wrong? And at least in this case, it seems like we've, there's some consensus around that. I think another source of optimism for me is, I guess, in the face of some challenges, was during the pandemic. I mean, it looked, you go back in time to March 2020, it looked pretty bleak.
Yep.
I mean, I started reading a book on the Spanish flu, and it was like, that's a 1,000-page book or something like that. Like, I couldn't get through it.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, now is this
where we're going? Yeah.
Yeah. But the team at First Bank was amazing. How we adapted from, we were all coming to the office 5 days a week, and now we're all working remotely. Yeah. Just the resiliency, the flexibility, and the dedication. So then, we had a pandemic, and then PPP loans. And so we were a big part of that and helping clients with PPP loans. And it wasn't something like, you show up at 9, leave at 4, and get all this stuff done. It's not our hours anyway.
Exactly.
But in that time period, people were working through the night, to get this done for our clients. And so the dedication they were showing in some really tough circumstances and adapting to a new environment where they're not seeing each other, face to face, that gives a lot of hope. So, might be some things out there to worry about, but overriding all of that, I think, is some optimism and real confidence and people to pull through this.
I appreciate that. I love that word, optimism. That's a great word. So, well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this journey with you. I'm excited to be a part of this going forward and to help that vision of serving family businesses come to fruition and just help realize the goals that you've set as an organization. So, and thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, Michael. Thank you very much.